Welcome to Season 1, Episode 11 of Digital Dissection, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look at our favorite properties. Today, we're going to go deep into the Rogues Gallery known as Batman's video game history, a journey that spans almost 35 years and over 60 titles, with ups and downs reminiscent of the DC cinematic universe.
Before we put on our own cowl and look really good while brooding on rooftops, we are Joe and Mark, two dudes who love discussing pop culture with you and hopefully bring you perspectives you wouldn't have found unless you're reading Wikipedia articles deep into the night. After you listen to the show, please like, comment, subscribe, and review. Reviews are very important to this show as we continue to grow our platform. We can't thank everyone enough for supporting us so far. In earlier episodes, you may remember us calling out specifically where to find this program. We're happy to announce that you can now find us wherever your favorite podcasts are found. You can find us by searching for Digital Dissection in your podcast. And if you're not following podcast websites, you can also find us on YouTube as well as Facebook and Twitter by searching at Digital Dissect 1. Our social media sites share more pop culture news and current information, so feel free to join the conversation.
Joe, how much Batman video game experience did you have growing up?
Growing up, pretty limited. I can only remember really playing probably 2, maybe 3 Batman games before I stopped living with my parents.
Okay,
Yeah. So not a whole lot. No.
I mean, I remember with some of the documentaries we've seen in recent memory, like right around the time that Batman first started entering video games, we had, I guess as a nation, we were healing from the video game wars, and there's a bunch of games out there, a ton of titles. Not all of them are all that great. Technology was obviously, good for the time, but there were companies that were just pushing out content knowing that there were rabid fans that wanted to play games. So
it was definitely more of a quantity over quality situation of what we had in the early console days.
Yes, absolutely. And what was interesting about the Batman video game history, though, is that it actually doesn't start where this time period of video gaming, would typically place it in. Now, in the outro for our last episode, you'd actually mentioned that Batman started as more of a PC game.
Yeah, that's true. It was probably 1989 when that first game came out. Or
actually,
maybe even
Joe,
sooner.
It would be the year of our mighty births, the year of 1986.
Look at that.
Yep,
it's a good year.
Yeah, it was a great year. We were cracking the champagne for several reasons. But in 86, Ocean Software actually kicked this thing off. So they were the company that published the first Batman game, which actually it was really unique for the time, because what it actually did was versus some of the other titles that were around at the time that were side scrollers, I call them low energy video games, right?
Yeah.
So Ocean Software's Batman would actually be like a 3D game that relied on, it's kind of like a bird's eye view perspective, but slightly tilted. So you kind of have this 3D perspective, but diagonally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's I think GTA and even early Fallout did that, didn't they?
Yeah, actually, I think the comparison to the original Fallout games is probably better for that. If you've ever played like the Super Mario RPG game,
oh yeah,
that's also a lot what this looks like from a perspective standpoint. So, but obviously, this is 86. Joe and I were pixelated back then too. So
everything was pixelated back then and barely in color.
Yeah, did you notice back then too that whenever you looked in the distance, everything was just foggy back in 86?
Yeah, because you hadn't unlocked the map yet and the world was only so big.
Yeah. Textures are horrible, everybody. But hey, even for the time, this game was very well received. One of the things that I thought was hilarious about this game was that it was number 2 in the UK for overall sales. It only fell behind the game called World Cup Carnival. So
Hmm.
Europeans love their
Was that
soccer.
soccer? Yeah. Yep.
That's basically it. But hey, you know what? What was really cool about this game was something that others wouldn't get for years would be its unique save system. So basically, it had checkpoints. So if you
Hmm.
died, you didn't have to start all the way over. Um,
Ooh.
so it was really kind of cool for the time. I wish more game developers would have picked up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like, I mean, I know this was PC, but console, like you had to beat everything in one sitting, otherwise it wasn't getting beaten.
Yeah,
Where you had to start all over again. Yeah, no, that'd have been really nice.
yeah. They introduced this back in '86. So for the folks that were developing games for like the next 5-6 years and just didn't do it, well, I don't know. I'm not going to make fun of people, I guess, for the technology that we have today, but but this
Hmm.
was actually the first of three games that that Ocean Software would be involved with publishing. So they didn't actually code every single one of these three games, though. So similar to what things that you've seen with like Gearbox, the guys
Hmm.
behind Borderlands,
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
Hmm.
they outsourced like the Aliens adaptation that they got. I don't remember that one that was kind of a bomb in
Oh, like
recent
most
memory.
aliens games. I mean, I'm sure this was no Colonial Marines, but
Yeah,
but it probably didn't do well.
well, that's the one that that was the one that Gearbox actually didn't do themselves. They kind of kicked that one out to somebody else.
Yeah.
So Colonial Marines is like the example of all examples that I like to take because I love Gearbox and
Hmm.
they've got egg on their face for that one. Um but so Ocean though would kick out three titles, like I said,
Hmm.
um, and they would use different teams each time. So what was really cool about this though is that despite having different creative teams on all three games, they still innovated in each one. So
Ooh.
the second game that they would do, it was in '88. It was Batman Cape Crusader.
Hmm.
And what was really interesting about it is I'm not sure if you ever remembered the Genesis game Comic Zone.
Oh no, I never played Comic Zone.
Okay, if you didn't, it's okay.
Hmm.
But what Cape Crusader really became known for was that you were basically playing within comic panels in a comic book
Hmm.
in the Batman game. So when you would go from one zone to the next, the style of it would show you as if you're going from a panel to a panel, like just like reading a
Ah,
comic book.
that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
So
an Ang Lee movie.
yeah, just in 1988 though,
Hmm.
Now keep in mind this is once again a very simplistic game. What was unique about it though is that it had two different paths you could go down. So whether
Ooh.
that was going against the Penguin or going against
Hmm.
the Joker, yeah, you could do either one. Um, as a game though, obviously this is once again pretty innovative, just like
Hmm.
the first Batman game here. But some of the gripes about it though is that it was just it was a major puzzle solver. So I get that Batman's the greatest detective. Don't get me wrong, but that's not what even back in
Hmm.
'88. This is not what people were playing video games for.
No.
Um, which is why I think when you look ahead to the next game they created, just
Hmm.
called Batman the movie in '89,
Hmm.
um, this would actually be a mixture of 2D and 3D levels. So just based on the Commodore, PC, the Amiga is what this game was actually paired with. So it's another
Hmm.
Commodore based PC. A little bit more processing power. So you had a combination of like side scrolling, but then also, if you remember the game Road Rash by chance, did you ever play Road
Did
Rash?
not do Road Rash.
Road Rash is another one of those like classic Genesis games where
Hmm.
you're basically driving on roads and you see like images that get closer to you, but it's not like they could do anything with intricate textures. So
Hmm.
you just saw a small image that got slightly enlarged as it got towards you.
Hmm.
So same type of idea here with the 3D levels where you're either driving the Batmobile or you're flying, one of his Batman trademarked aerial vehicles. um,
Hmm.
but yeah, you had more processing power. So the levels were kind of interesting because at this point in time, Joe, this is where we get introduced to the idea of the subgame style. Now, if you're not familiar with subgame,
Hmm.
all it means is mini games, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, mini
Um,
games are great. Love mini
yeah,
games.
yeah, and this Batman game was kind of the face for it because if you played Batman the movie, the game in 1989.
Yeah. Batman, the movie, the game, the mini game.
Well, the style of the game was interesting because you would shift from a side-scrolling game to, like I
Hmm.
said, to the vehicle-based games. There was a puzzle-based mini game in there too,
Hmm.
and so once again, this is 1989, but this was very innovative. People weren't really doing this kind of stuff yet. If you went back and played it now, though, Joe, I mean, even as a DC fan, I don't think you'd get a whole lot of value out of it. Um, but this actually was granted Game of the Year by Crash Magazine back in
Ooh.
1989. So clearly the people were loving it.
Yeah, the people loved it. It was a great time by the sound of it.
Yeah, got the people going.
It did. Had several levels of game inside of it.
It did. It did. It was really kind of cool though. I mean, looking back at it, I can appreciate the innovation for what it was, even if it was somewhat poorly written out. But hey,
Hmm.
either way, this is really Batman we're talking about here. So, but I think it's
Hmm.
important to realize though, you've got three games that feature
Hmm.
Batman. It's the late '80s, and each one does something pretty cool. I mean, so we got the unique checkpoint system. We've got
Hmm.
this comic panel thing that would inspire a literal patent by Sega to put out this Comic Zones game. So I don't know if you're familiar with the story behind that, but Sega literally applied for a patent and got it for the style of game that they made with this comic panel
Oh,
orientation.
no way.
Yeah. So yeah, Batman Cape Crusader, it's actually
Hmm.
credited with being the inspiration for that. And then we've got obviously this sub game style that the movie game came out with. So
Hmm.
pretty early, heavy hitting things coming out of the Batman series here.
Yeah, which seems very like the opposite of like the Batman games I remember playing growing up. Like, um, I think this is probably where like the games probably start to really take that decline from being innovated to just kind of a game that gets pushed out there for consumption. Um, because I,
Yeah,
yeah, like the Batman games I remember growing up of like the three that I played, were awful, and I kind of kept hoping that they would get better. Like maybe I haven't touched a Batman game in years. Maybe this will be better, and I feel like I was just secretly like, nope. You open the game, put it in. We're gonna punch you straight in the stomach again as you go through it.
well, it's funny you would mention that, joke, because I was trying to think of a term that would really fit well for this, and what I
Hmm.
settled on was this was the time in the Batman video game series that I equated it to, let's just call it a fart that got trapped in the Batman suit. it, it took
Yeah,
a
that sounds right.
really
Yeah.
it took a really long time to get out.
Hmm.
So, and honestly, I couldn't think of a better way to kick this off than with a game called Revenge of Shinobi in 1989. Are you familiar
Hmm.
with that one?
I've played Shinobi 3, but I don't think I played Revenge of Shinobi.
Hey, that's okay. This is one of those
Hmm.
games that will routinely pop up on these top 10 lists because it's known for its laziness. So it was a Sega Genesis game that
Hmm.
had the guy who was actually doing the art and designing this game. Uh, it's really common in video games to just kind of make a placeholder that
Hmm.
you hope your art team will come back to and replace with something different, right?
Yeah.
So one of the real life examples of that would be Kirby, like the Kirby line of
Yeah.
games.
Hmm. Because
Kirby was
yeah,
just
they couldn't
yeah,
think of an actual shape for the character, so they just had like the little ball with tiny arms and legs running around, and then it turned out that worked out great. That was a great idea.
yeah. The more
Hmm.
people looked at it, the more they loved it. Just kind of worked out well. And history is, it's all there now.
Yeah.
Kirby's all over the place. He's a
Hmm.
adorable little, puffball. Um, but Revenge of Shinobi would actually be the laziest like video game crew of all time because the actual art director for the game, he basically just drew what he thought things should look like, which included Godzilla,
Oh.
Terminator,
Oh no.
Sylvester Stallone as we've got Spider-Man and Batman. So he just drew these
Oh.
things and thought, yeah, my art team's going to take care of this. That did not happen.
Oh no.
So so they literally drew unauthorized likenesses of all of these characters.
Oh no.
Yeah. So you're a ninja fighting Batman. You're like, that's clearly
Clearly
Batman.
Batman.
And yeah, he does not belong here. So it's a very it's a very fun earmark to make, is like the beginning of this turn. Because I mean, so you mentioned we were obviously, folks, we were talking before we hit the record button here, but Joe had mentioned playing some of the original Batman games, and so 1989 wouldn't just give us Revenge of Shinobi, it would also give us the Batman NES game.
Yeah.
So we're shifting away from Ocean Software, and now a company called Sunsoft is responsible for this. And so they made a game that was loosely based on, the movie of the same name. It was a side scroller that was, pretty well received, but it was like the hardest fucking game I've ever played.
Yeah, like I don't remember getting very far in that game at all before I just shut it off. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like it felt like there are games that there are two different ways. The way I see it when it comes to video games, like there is something that makes it challenging, and they get that at just the right level where the challenge is fun because you fail the first few times doing it, you recognize what you did, you can go back and fix it, and you can eventually beat that part of the game. And then there's, let's just make this really hard for the sake of it being hard. And it makes it damn near impossible to get any further in the game without like wanting to like launch your controller at a wall as fast as it can be. And that's what this first game, that's what this Batman game did to me. It's like there's no beating this game.
Yeah, and the worst part about it too for me, Joe, is that you're playing like a purple Batman, right? Like he's just purple. There's nothing really to him. It's just like a purple, cell.
Yep.
and so this Batman game would be ridiculously difficult, and it falls in line with a lot of these other NES games, like the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, Ghostbusters 2. Even the original Ghostbusters game. These things were all on the NES, and each one of them was like the hardest fucking game you've ever played. But something interesting about this game, though, Joe, is that it would actually feature some of these Batman characters that you don't end up seeing again, like in any other games. So that would be like Deadshot, KG Beast. Actually, Heatwave is in here. I think he shows up again.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. These guys were in this game, and these are characters that just kind of got lost to time. Like you just don't really see them ever again.
No,
so
not really.
So I would say that despite being well received, though, the difficulty of that game, when paired with this Shinobi connection, it really kicks off this history, this behavior of games that just don't really do anything for most fans, and even for most video game fans.
You're kind of left struggling, thinking like who these games were made for. And it's hard to say it was even just Batman. Like I don't remember there being like really good superhero games out there for the longest time growing up.
I would agree with you to an extent, except for some of the X-Men games, the side-scrolling X-Men games. Those are really pretty solid. But yeah, I guess outside of that, I'm trying to think just off the top of my head.
That X-Men arcade was really great. Death and Return of Superman was fun. That one I remember enjoying. I think on the Genesis too, there's a Wolverine title that was really good, where it was just Wolverine. I think it was like Adamantium Rage or something.
Yeah,
that one was fun.
Yeah. So I mean, it was possible for
definitely possible
superhero games to be fun. But that's not really what would happen here. So over the next, I think this was the better part of maybe 15 years.
Oof, yikes.
Yeah, we have we seriously have a property that just struggles very hard to do anything here. So we end up having a game called Batman Return of the Joker, or Revenge of the Joker, in 91. So this would be another Sunsoft title. What I thought was unfortunate about it is that it was pretty strongly based on the comics. It was ported to the Genesis. I think it would end up being a a Super Nintendo, ROM game later, but otherwise it was the same platforms that we were talking about earlier. And even though it borrows mostly from the comics, it did borrow all of like the movie vehicle assets, which I thought was kind of funny. Um, but once again, this is one of those games that it had pretty good art. It was a faster, like side scroller type of game, but the reviews were just mixed. Nobody really cared for the game. I mean, if you go back and look at all of the major gaming publications at the time, I mean, they're all giving this thing like a D minus.
Ooh, ouch.
Like,
ouch. Yeah.
yeah, technically a passing grade, right?
I mean, it's hard to say it's even mixed reviews at that point. That's kind of like when you go and get like those Harry Potter jelly beans, except that like 1 out of every 5 jelly beans is when I really go 2 out of every 5 jelly beans is something that tastes good, and the other 3 are the puke flavored ones.
Yeah.
And that was your odds of enjoying the Batman games that came out for 15 years.
Well, this one though, even though I said it was for the time it got mixed reviews, one thing I will say about this that walks that back just a little bit was that both IGN and I believe The Gamer, it's an online publication, in 2019 and 2020, both of them revisited the game and said in hindsight, like we were talking about earlier, when you go back and look at some of these, they're just horrible.
Oh yeah.
They actually said that this game wasn't worth all the hate that it got.
Okay.
I mean, so I thought that was kind of interesting that for all of the Batman games that people could go back to and essentially give it a mulligan, this one actually got some credit for what it tried to do. So I guess the point of it is, if you're gonna fuck up, just look good while you do it.
Yeah, at the very least, like look, it's like that the red green show where it's like, if you can't be handsome, you can at least be handy.
Yes.
Whereas in this case, like, he's not handy, but he's a little handsome, so it's all right.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know who Red Green is, if you've ever watched any public access, especially here in Wisconsin, he's just a good old fashioned redneck that knows ingenuity and wears suspenders.
Wears suspenders and ingenuity. Basically, it's ingenuity as long as duct tape is involved.
Yeah.
You can fix basically anything with duct tape.
Which is a really funny thing that we can kind of carry into with our next trip on our Batman through the years video game journey, and that would be this shifting into tie-in mode here, right? Yeah, some of the original games here technically were loosely based on the movies. Well, Batman Returns would end up getting a very heavy treatment from video games. So these would come out in 1992 to 1993. Literally 8 different versions of this game came out. I personally had access to the Atari and the Game Gear versions of this. And let me just tell you, Joe, there were some games that just weren't meant for a 6-year-old Mark to play. Okay. I knew my limitations. Okay. My reactions were shit. I was 6 years old. Okay. You could, but these games, Joe, I watch them frustrate adults. I mean, I consider myself to be a pretty decent gamer for a 6-year-old. But the hardest thing about the Atari version of Batman Returns, you had one life to complete the entire game.
Yeah. One life. So imagine that you screw up once, the whole thing's just shot.
Yes.
Oh God.
Yes. So that game was, when I say impossible, everybody, I don't just mean that in jest.
No, it was literally impossible.
Yes. This game was so fucking difficult. I mean, it had mixed reviews. I mean, it was, I would say it was the first real entry in the Batman video game universe here that had a very muddied critical response, right? So we just talked about a D- here. Well, there were some people that gave this game like a 1.5 out of 10.
Whew.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's pretty much F- territory. if such a grade existed, you failed so bad. We've created a new small subcategory of failure just for you.
Yeah.
And that's where Batman Returns lies.
Well, to quote one of our characters from Futurama, Dr. Wernstrom, I think he would give this an F minus minus because just difficulty alone. I just don't understand why you would give your players one life to complete an entire game. It just doesn't make any
Yeah,
sense.
again, like it's that second category of difficulty where it's not challenging. It's like, no, you've made this hard for the sake of making it hard, and that's not good for anyone.
It's almost like they were harvesting our tears, Joe, for some kind of energy source. I don't know what they were going for. I really don't. But yeah, once again, this continues this really just awful journey that Batman games would go through. And there was a really quick game that was also released in '93 called Batman the Animated Series, which, I mean, the animated series of Batman was some of the best like TV watching I did during that time.
Oh, absolutely. And it was like, that's like, if you ever get a chance to like watch like any like behind the scenes work on that, I think there's a great documentary on YouTube for it. But like looking at like the amount of creative freedom that team had and their idea with it, like that show was like the perfect storm of creativity for cartoons in the 90s. It redefined what you could basically what shows could get away with, and how you could entertain children with pretty adult storylines.
Yeah, they did some pretty heavy-handed shit with that show. And I think once again, this is another one of those testaments to the talent involved. We've mentioned this with a couple of properties already, but I mean, we would get Kevin Conroy, who would voice Batman for, I mean, pretty sure he still is.
He still does, yeah.
Yeah, we got Mark Hamill. We get Tara Strong out of this too. I mean, good Lord, we had some, legends of the voice acting industry involved in that, but unfortunately, on the Game Boy, they were not able to do such a thing. And I played this game. I mean, it wasn't horrible. One of the things that was interesting about it, though, is you could switch between characters. So you could actually switch between Batman or Robin, and each one had different abilities that they could use, so that they could switch between them to solve issues in the level. So that at least was something, especially for a portable game. They'd re-release the game later, but honestly, I don't even really know who was playing it. I didn't interact with that one. But we actually get a little bit of a break here until '95. So in '95, have you ever heard of the company Jumpstart Games?
Not ringing a bell.
Hey, that's totally fine. They're an education-based video game developer.
Oh boy.
But you know what, though? I wouldn't actually worry too much, because they actually made a series of different games that were just cartoon makers for popular comic book properties. So you would actually have like sprites of these characters, and you could create your own little mini episodes on your computer. So Batman would get that treatment. Batman and Robin, would have their own little cartoon maker. So yeah, you'd have like these little pre-recorded cell movements that you could place on the screen. You'd had, backgrounds that were used, and they put them right into this little like PowerPoint style cartoon maker. So I spent more time with the Spider-Man cartoon maker by the same company. But these were fun little games, man. Like, I mean, yeah, obviously this isn't like Arkham Asylum types of video games or anything, but
but they're fun in their own right.
Yeah, dude, it was fun. I enjoyed doing it. We would even like we would take recordings of movies and stuff and save the sound files and move them into the game. And so it was I guess if you looked back at it now, people would go like, what the hell were people doing? But yeah, it was kind of fun. I wasn't originally going to put this on the list because I'm sure there's only like 8 people who knew what Jumpstart Games even was. But to get back to the idea of tie-ins, though, that would bring us to the Batman Forever game, which I'm not sure if you were a big fan of Batman Forever, but
I think that movie gets more hate than it deserves. I was all right with Batman Forever.
Not nearly as bad as Batman and Robin, right?
No.
but the game would definitely deserve your hate. The reason why I mentioned this, so we just talked about sprites in the, the cartoon maker. Well, this game would actually be based on the same engine that Mortal Kombat was.
Oh, okay.
So you have sprite-based movements that,
Mm-hmm.
for the time, were cutting edge. They looked really cool. They weren't as clunky as some of these other video games that looked really rigid.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that would basically be the only good thing about this game, was the fact that you had cool looking sprites.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now Batman, obviously title character, he's supposed to look good. But you found out while playing this game that they didn't spend a whole lot of time making different enemies. So you're fighting
Like the same thing over and over again.
You're fighting like the same three guys over and over again. So it's really, the sprites, they look good, but
Mm-hmm.
you saw them way too often. And you could really clearly tell here that, this boxer only had one good hand it punched from, because the background in the controls, both fucking horrible. I mean, you're seeing the sprites and you're like, yeah, this
Mm-hmm.
stuff looks great, but then it looked like somebody just took one texture and copy pasted it like 100 times for the background. So it just was not, it wasn't good.
No.
It just wasn't good. So even though when folks are kind of hearing about this, being based on the same engine as Mortal Kombat, they're all kind of turning towards the TV a little bit, going like, oh, okay,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, let's see what this is
Hold
all
the film.
about.
This would look nice.
Yeah,
And it
but
kind of did.
kind of, yeah,
Kind of, yeah, kind of. Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean,
Wouldn't say did, but kind of.
yeah, this one just didn't do well. And it would lead into another game that wouldn't do very well in 1998. So we talked about Batman and Robin. Well, once again, we've got another Batman game. We've got another movie tie-in to go along with it. And the Batman and Robin game, if I just told you, just if we just took the facts of this game and I presented them to you, well, actually, why don't we just do that? How about this, Joe? So for the Batman and Robin game in 1998, it was actually an open world game.
Yeah, yeah. I actually had this one. I honestly forgot I did until you
Yeah.
just brought it up. I was like, wait a second, I had this one.
Yeah, yeah, you had, and so you had the game that was like based on these timed events, right? And you would have to do things before the timer would go off, otherwise the mission would fail.
Yep.
And it didn't sound like it was going to be that bad of a game.
No,
right?
Like on paper, it should be fine.
No, it would not be fine.
It would be far from fine.
Yeah, it was just horrible gameplay mechanics. I mean, technically you could play, multiple different characters, but one of the things that was always great about the open world games of the future that would come after this, open world games are meant for you to be able to go and do whatever you want. You can play the main storyline, right? But the fun was really just in the side missions, and that's where you wasted a lot of your time, right?
Yeah, side missions and just kind of exploring the open world that you have and getting to know it.
Yeah, except you have an open world where you have to do timed based events.
Yeah, so it's really weird that it's like a fake. I guess it's more of like almost like you think of like sandbox games where like they have like these large levels, and you have a little like freedom in exploring them, but levels like I don't know, they're kind of lock off to a certain point where you get so far and you can't go any further back, and that's kind of what this was like a really big sandbox. Yeah, you had all this open world, but you had to basically play where they wanted you to play, otherwise you couldn't do anything in the game.
Yeah, and part of it, you have to start to wonder here, because you look at a lot of these tie-in games, and the assumption is, yeah, I'm sure that somebody only gave me like a year to make this stuff. Think like the original ET game that came out.
Oh God, yeah. Heralded is like the worst video game ever made.
Yeah, well, I just hold that thought, Joe.
We've got more Batman to cover.
we have some more. Yes, we'll get there shortly, but yeah, this game, it just missed the mark in a lot of ways. But yeah, when we say open world, I think sandbox would fit it much better. Yeah, you have the real-time events, you've got you know, like traffic and
Mm-hmm.
you know actual people that are moving around and everything, and that's what it should look like.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, people just said it was I don't know. They didn't like the graphics. I thought
Oh
the graphics
no.
actually looked okay, but it's just you could tell this was like a sandbox game before perfection, or before we
Mm-hmm.
got, you know, developers who actually could put more time into it. And so this game really suffered because of that. It just, you could probably tell it was a rush timeline. They had to get something out for the movie.
Yep.
um, so the guts of that game probably should have been okay, but ultimately that's not what we ended up
Just yeah,
getting.
just fell.
Yeah. So yeah, that would take us into, though, you know, a couple of years where Batman would once again still be in stasis here. Once
Mm-hmm.
again, we've got this fart trapped in the bat suit. Um, and so Ubisoft would actually step in. They would create some side scroller Batman games. I think they did a racing game too.
Oh.
Um, and yeah, I think they would even get all the voice actors for Batman Vengeance as well. So
Oh,
yeah,
nice. Yeah, the one of the I think it was that one of the two GameCube entries I remember coming out with. I mean, that generation of like PS2, GameCube, and original Xbox.
yeah, these are ones I didn't really play.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of remember hearing of Vengeance. I heard of Gotham City Racer because I just thought, you know, why turn superheroes into racing games? But
Mm-hmm.
that's a topic for another day. But
Yep.
yeah,
And at the same time, also, why didn't you take advantage of calling it Bat Cart like 64 or something? Come on. If you're gonna go ham, you just go full ham. You don't half-ass it like that.
well, the thing was, like, obviously with 60 different games that came out involving Batman,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I couldn't go back and play every single one of these, but I had some friends that played these, and ultimately the Ubisoft ones were just kind of panned by critics. Fans didn't really care for them either. The
Mm-hmm.
folks I talked to didn't seem to care for them either. And it's kind of a shame too that for, you know, Batman Vengeance to get the voice actors back for it, and then it just kind of gets lost
Yeah.
to time.
Yeah.
um, that would be unfortunate that
Mm-hmm.
happens. But either way, I kind of was planning to skip over this anyway,
Mm-hmm.
because Joe, when you said the worst game of all time,
Oh yeah.
that distinction is believed to go to 2003's Batman Dark Tomorrow.
Oh my God, that game. Oh, that was horrible. Oh, I'm so happy you didn't play it. Only one of us had to go through that bullshit.
Oh no, I played this. I
Because
played this game. I
you
played
did
this
play this
game.
game. Oh, okay. I thought
Oh
you didn't. Oh my God. Did you get to the
yeah.
end?
No, I hated the game that much. For those of you who remember my Assassin's Creed 3 experience, for Dark Tomorrow, Joe, I maybe got about halfway through that game. And mostly because the camera angles were so bad in that game.
They're horrible and they're fixed. Like, so when you go from like basically like transition from like one part of the level to the next, the camera angle changes and you're just stuck with it. You
Yes.
can't do anything about it. And so like you'll have like this really like think of like in a movie, they have this nice big like wide out like establishing shot where the character is maybe like really close to you, but then you've got this really big like scene in the background so you could see the beauty of what the director's setting up. Okay, now think of the opposite of that. And instead of
Mhm.
the character being really close to you, the character is really far in the background. And so Batman's like a dot and you got other dots coming at you and you have to try and fight them.
Yes.
And that happens in places in this game.
Dude, this is one of those really weird scenarios where you have people who actually write, you know, for comics,
Mm-hmm.
and Hal Scott Peterson of DC, what he wrote for this game. Um, and so usually when I have a strong writing contingent here, like I can
Mm-hmm.
appreciate certain things of this. I mean, the story itself, it was okay,
Yeah.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's some writing praise, and I'm not the only one saying that. If you guys look up, you know, Dark Tomorrow, or yeah, Dark Tomorrow, and you look back at this and you look at the some of those aspects of it, yeah, people are going to say, yeah, it didn't have the worst writing ever,
Mm-hmm.
but the mechanics were horrible.
Oh yeah.
You know, there was a lot of stealth involved in this game.
Oh, fucking
Um,
stealth missions, man. The bane
but
of my video game existence. Them in water levels.
dude, oh,
Worst two things ever.
that's probably the only thing that could have made this game worse. But
Mm-hmm.
the one of the dumbest things about this game, though, was that they cranked up Batman not killing people to 11. And so you can't kill people in this game. You can only handcuff them.
Yep. And if you don't handcuff them, they get back up and will start fighting you again.
Yes, they do.
It's like, God, yeah.
Dude, who, like, I get people have fetishes, right? Like if handcuffing is your kink, that's fine.
Yep, you're into that. That's cool. No judgment.
But if you're one dude who's living in Gotham City and you somehow have access to tens of thousands of handcuffs, I'm sorry, that's probably gonna raise some suspicion.
A little bit. It's like, who can afford to buy all these handcuffs? Probably Bruce Wayne. Boom. Yeah. Figured out. Found.
But how could he carry that many around with him in all these missions? It just doesn't make any sense.
No, like you have to imagine that if these more realistically, like he has to be zip tying these guys. He just has tiny little bat zip ties that he goes over everyone, because how could you can't carry that many handcuffs.
I mean, even then at that point, it'd be ridiculous to see the Batman's utility belt have like a massive like 3-gallon pocket just for
zip ties.
Just for zip ties.
Oh my gosh. Like they could have at least like gone out the route where like maybe if you just punch them enough, like they just have Z's coming off of them, so they're sleeping and they're knocked out indefinitely. It'd be exactly what like
the Batman series. Yeah.
Yep. They're sleeping. Yeah, we just put them to sleep the whole time.
God, seriously, folks, if you want to take a break right now and just go look up Dark Tomorrow, I highly recommend doing it because there's a lot of stuff out there on it. We're not just the only ones saying this. It is. I think it is one of the worst games of all time I've ever played. And
absolutely. And I mean, I'll even spoil it to jump up for it, because like Mark did the smart thing. He's like, nope, I'm almost made it halfway through this game. I don't really know. I'm done because this game sucks. My take on it is like, I won't let this crappy video game beat me. So I played all the way through to the end, and the final boss is Ra's al Ghul, and he's basically set up this plan to flood Gotham, and basically wipe the slate clean or something with humanity. I don't know. Really terrible contrived plan. So if you lose to Ra's al Ghul, he floods the world, and you figure that out. If you lose to Ra's al Ghul and you didn't save the game, boom, okay, lost, game over. The bad guy wins with his plan. Okay, that makes sense. So then you think, okay, well, I'll go back to my save file from before I lost and play through, and this time I just won't lose. You do that. And then it cuts to a cutscene of Ra's al Ghul fucking doing it anyway.
Ugh.
So no matter what happens, you lose. And how infuriating is that? That you fight through this whole crappy game all the way to the end, hoping for some sort of like semblance of a victory, and nope, you lose no matter what. Oh, it's because it's called Dark Tomorrow. Don't you get it? Yeah, I get it, and it sucks. I'm still not happy about it.
Wow. I'm happy I did not play it that long. Jesus Christ. Wow. Just like Billy Mays, man, there's more. Except it can get far worse.
It can get way worse, and it does get worse. No, oh man, that was bad.
Sorry to rip that Band-Aid off, Joe.
that repressed memory just came flooding back all at once.
Well, this one, the next entry in the series, would actually also come out in 2003, and it would actually be the last game that was based on the Batman animated universe. So I'm not sure if you remember the game Batman: The Rise of Tsinzu.
I remember hearing about it, but no, I never played it.
Honestly, it's kind of a shame that this was like where the character was introduced. I'm not saying he was a great character or anything. I think he's just described as like an specific like an Asian crime lord, you know.
Okay.
And honestly, in this game, they once again brought back some decent voice acting for it. The same animated series folks came back, like Kevin Conroy, Tara Strong. I think even Ron Perlman was here for Clayface. So yeah, I mean, good voice acting as always, right, for the animated stuff. But it was just a standard beat 'em up game. And at this point in time, we're only a few years off from some of the next gen games. So this game just kind of got lost to time. Jim Lee, who actually wrote for the animated series, specifically created Shinzu for this game.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, if the animated universe kept going, they would have probably had more things they could use. But yeah, just because it's a standard beat 'em up game, it's just another one of those Batman games that got lost to the vault.
Yeah.
And so I always just felt bad for the animated series folks that kept coming back. They kept doing solid work, and I mean, unfortunately, I just don't know if many people appreciate it. But across the board, yeah, this was another one of those like D minus D, strong D games. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just people just weren't nice to it. So ultimately, it's a shame that this is kind of where the animated series officially drops off.
Mm-hmm.
And Shinzu just didn't gain any popularity because, well, he wasn't really seen in anything else attached to Batman.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to get into a video game about the animated series, and you have a character who is not in the animated series.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, dude, it just to me it seemed like the oddest thing to do. I mean, if you're gonna formulate a
Mm-hmm.
character that you want to bring into a universe like this, why do it in a standard beat 'em up
Yeah.
game?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it didn't end up getting like it didn't end up being on the greatest hits, player's choice, or platinum hits for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, or Xbox. So
Ooh.
once again, Joe, this is not just us talking shit on Batman games here.
This is just how it was.
This
It's the truth.
yeah,
It just wasn't a good game, like many of his games in the past.
yeah. This is everyone universally recognizing that, yeah, these are just mistakes. Now, Joe, why would 2005 be an important year?
Well, it's my first year of college, still living with my parents. That's unfortunate, but it was saving me money. And it was a time where I was beginning to blossom into the man I would become.
Yes, the coming of age story.
I have no other idea why 2005 would be special, unless it's because Batman games begin to not necessarily suck so hard.
Oh, and your phrasing couldn't be better because literally this would be the year of Batman Begins.
Mm-hmm. And this is a case, and like I think this is one of those tie-in games to a movie that actually isn't bad, which especially with superhero games, I've only ever found like maybe one or two other times.
Yeah, we're not going to
Mhm.
talk about the Puss in Boots tie-in.
I think that's more pain for you than it is me.
Which I'm ashamed to say I've even played that game. But no, 2005's Batman Begins would actually end up being a pretty solid game for a movie tie-in. Just like you mentioned, one of the cool things about this game was that you actually got to play a version of Batman who did seem like someone was paying attention to the character. And that's because there were things like environmental conditions that you would use as Batman to inspire fear in the enemies you're fighting
Ooh.
against. So there is like an intimidation meter as well that you saw based on the things that you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you've ever seen like this is a funny one to use, but if you ever saw like the children's movie Monsters Incorporated,
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
it's the same idea, man. Like it's it's the build up to the scare almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this game would actually be universally recognized as being a lot of the inspiration for what would be the Arkham series that we'll get to in a little bit here. Um, but it actually had some pretty solid mechanics in it, which involve things like the sneak up takedown that would be consistent for a lot of the Ubisoft games that would come out, like the
Mm-hmm.
Splinter Cell series, the same type of idea. So even though this game wasn't perfect, there once again we've got some texture issues here, and things didn't look perfect. Once again, movie tie-in,
Oh yeah.
pretty strong guts here. And one of the cool things about this game was once again voice cast. Somehow somebody was able to get everyone from the main cast to come back to voice their characters for this game.
All
So
right.
yeah, dude, you've got everybody from Christian Bale, I mean, all the way down to Tom Wilkinson. Literally Carmine Falcone was in this. The only person that they didn't get was Gary Oldman, but everybody else was there. So I just still can't believe they're able to pull that off.
Yeah, that is very good. I mean, even thinking like other DC properties like around that time, I remember Superman Returns came out, I think a year or so after that.
Mhm.
And that was one, not to completely sidetrack into the game series, that was one where like they actually had a really good concept for the game because Superman didn't take damage, the city took damage, and if the city took too much damage, you just lost.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but I mean, it suffered like other like Batman similar issues where like if you flew up high enough and looked back down at the world, it was like a bunch of just brown like rectangles. Like, oh, this is horrible. But that's another case where they got at least Brandon Routh to come back and voice Superman, which and Kevin Spacey came back and did Lex Luthor for the game. So I don't know what was going on with DC games at that time, but they were really good at getting their big names to come back and voice their video game characters.
Yeah, maybe we should have looked at who their lawyers were at that point in time.
'Cause they're good people. They know they're or at least good at their jobs. I don't know them personally.
Yeah, whose agent signed that deal? Because I mean, I honestly I think that's what helped Batman Begins
Mm-hmm.
end up being a pseudo solid game. Um, I would say that once again it wasn't perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and so once again it's kind of a controls thing. The controls had some, once again we got pretty cool on the takedowns and the environmental effects, but either way, we could probably spend a good amount of time just talking about the development of that series.
Mm-hmm.
But this game was probably a strong like 66%. Like it was on the cusp of something great. But I think this is like the stepping stone to what we would get
Mm-hmm.
in just a few years. But to I guess to tone down the seriousness for a moment, Joe, there would be a very important shift in the Batman universe in 2008. And I don't know if you're prepared for this one.
I'm not, but lay it on me.
So, Batman would take a critical turn down the Lego treatment in 2008.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
And there was three titles that would come out. So it would be 2008, 2012, and 2014. And it would just be sequels to the Batman Lego game, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I wanted to call out these games is because this is one of the situations here within the Batman universe where we're actually getting into like original content. Okay, like we're not looking at movie tie-ins anymore.
Mm-hmm.
This is a game that was, just an original storyline. I'm not going to go into the details of this because there's three games and dozens of hours. Okay, so, but if you've ever played a Lego game before, you've got a pretty solid gaming experience. They're pretty addictive games, and that part of the game will usually last you a good 15 20 hours, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you've just got fun environments to play through. There's some standard puzzle solving in there. But one of the cool things about Lego games is that the storylines themselves usually very endearing. Like every time I played a Lego game, I can say that my stress level is like an all-time low. And so
Mm-hmm.
but what the Lego Batman series did extremely well is introduce us to the broader world of the DC universe. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Batman may have been at the center of these games. Like his name is on each title, but these are all like open world games where you get to play either in a version of like Gotham or in the third game, you actually end up going into space and you're visiting like each individual planet of some of the specific superheroes.
Oh, cool.
So you have a huge cast of characters. Alongside those characters are going to come endless Easter eggs that you get
Mm-hmm.
from, the entire properties. So we're not just looking at Batman in a vacuum here. We're looking at everything. Okay. So I know there are people out there that are going like, why are you giving so much praise to a children's game?
Lego games are fun though. Oh my gosh, if you have not played a Lego game yet, get out and rent a freaking Lego game.
Yeah.
Uh, they're good times. They're like you said, like if you're seeing them as children's games, like they're kind of like this stress-free like time savers. Like I don't know, they're a good way to unwind from your day playing Lego games.
Yeah, they seriously are. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's why, I mean, and I haven't just played these ones. Like I played the movie tie-ins for, Lord of the Rings,
Mm-hmm.
um, Indiana Jones, they even did like a Marvel
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
Marvel
All the
Avengers
Avengers
series.
were there. I mean, they did. I think Jurassic World
Yeah.
has them too. It's like there's a Lego game out there for some fandom that you like, more
Well,
than likely,
and
possibly.
that's the credit I wanted to give here was
Mm-hmm.
that no matter what Lego game you're playing, there's a very high likelihood that the team that made it actually gave a shit about
Mm-hmm.
it because it's the truth. They really do. Whoever their research teams are that are working on these things, um, I got to give credit to them. Like there are characters in these Batman games, and I mentioned a couple names before, like you just would not see again in a Batman game. They're pulling names out of the vault here, um, with these games.
Mm-hmm.
So Traveler's Tales is the company that develops these, right? So Traveler's Tales, they just there's something about their development team that just gets this stuff. So I can't remember how many characters you can unlock in the first Batman game. But in 2 and 3, I think the list is like at least 120 to 150.
Oh yeah, 'cause I think with the first game, I think you're limited to like his immediate allies and his villains, and
Yeah,
then when they open it up, it's like the entire like most of the DC's universe heroes you can play as.
yeah, yeah. And the funniest part about this too is that in the Marvel games, like Stan Lee is in the game. And so there's this thing called Stan Lee in Peril where you have to like go save him multiple different times on the
Yep.
maps. And so
I
so
remember those. Those were fun.
what's nice about the Batman ones is that Adam West kind of replaces that,
Hmm.
Adam West replaces the Stan Lee side of it. So yeah, yeah. All of a sudden you just hear Adam West like in the back of your mind, you just hear go, help. And you're like, wait, what?
Well, huh? It's actually Adam West too, isn't it? They actually got him to voice that, I think.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's actually Adam West. So yeah, before he passed away, he
Hmm.
he lent his voice acting talent to those games. So I definitely thought it was worth spending a little bit of time here, because the Lego games wouldn't just focus on Batman; they'd actually even go into the DC supervillains as well at some
Hmm.
point. So yeah, there is just a lot of good things to come out of this, and so I will definitely tell people if you have not played these games, give them a shot. they're they're really solid. And I'm not going to go through the full list of voice actors
Hmm.
in these games because there's obviously way too many
Oh
to
yeah.
mention here. But for the Batman games, I will say specifically that Tom Kenny, if you know who Tom Kenny is, he literally
No.
dude literally voices SpongeBob SquarePants.
Oh, I should just know this. Yeah, I'm bad with names apparently. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know Adam. I know him. I know him. I'm familiar with his work then.
Yeah, he would actually lend his voice acting to this game. And you'd also get some prolific voice actors from video games.
Hmm.
So Steve Blum, I'm not sure if you've ever heard that name
Oh, of
before.
course. Yeah. I think the first time I did anything with Steve, I heard Steve Blum was probably Cowboy Bebop. Way back when. But yeah, Steve Blum does so many voices. Like there's a like if you've watched cartoons from like I think probably late 90s like through current, like you've heard Steve Blum at some point in time.
Yeah, yeah, dude. It's not that you're going to recognize every one of the voice actors'
Mm-mm.
names, but you can trust that the people that did do work in these, they have been in the industry for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so once again, I know this is something we've said multiple different times, can't be understated here. The voice acting talent is phenomenal for these. So
Yep.
um, I know for me, when I hear a different voice in a game, it can kind of pull me out of it. Everybody thinks Kevin Conroy,
Mm-hmm.
but hey, the Steve Blum did a great job. So yeah, pretty solid in these games, and obviously they were a lot of fun. But yeah, dude, that kind of brings us to a point here where the doors kind of get blown off of Batman
Mm-hmm.
from a gaming experience.
Yep.
And this is one of those moments, Joe, where you have a hell of a lot more experience with this than I do.
Yeah, these were probably like one, they're amazing Batman games, like just incredible Batman games. But on top of that, like these were just some of the best video games each year they came out that you could get. Was the Arkham series, with the exception of Arkham Origins. That one was Rocksteady wasn't involved with making that game, and it was
Yeah.
kind of just like Warner Brothers wanted another game, so they just kind of used the same Unreal Engine, used a lot of the same stuff, and it just felt like an unpolished version of the previous two games you've gotten before that. But anyway, when Arkham Asylum, which is the first one that came out, again, you've got probably like the two quintessential voice actors in the Batman universe of Kevin Conroy and
Mark
uh,
Hamill.
yeah, Mark Hamill are back to reprise their roles. I'm also forgetting was Tara Strong Harley Quinn?
Yeah,
Yep,
I believe so
I
actually.
believe she's back.
But yeah, I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure she is.
Yep. So those three, like those are like the big three, like Batman animated voices that you have, and they're all back for this game. Which, I mean, if you put Kevin Conroy on it, there's a good chance I'm gonna just gravitate to it and enjoy it because he's my favorite Batman voice of all time. But you felt like you were playing a comic book story in this game, on top of like the actual game mechanics of that game were so incredible. Like the combat system, like just almost like flowed like effortlessly from like villain to villain in that game. So if you're unfamiliar with the game series, it's pretty great. Where you start off by driving Joker to the asylum, to Arkham Asylum,
Mhm.
and this is all, it turns out to be Joker's plan, is to basically lock Batman in the asylum, and then your game is trying to get out of the asylum, and you're fighting through Batman's rogues gallery of villains. So it's at the point where it is open world, also a little sandboxy because like you do have side quests and things you can do. The Riddler's his own side quest. You have to find all of his little trophies, and then you can
Oh, yeah.
defeat the Riddler's his own side thing. Otherwise, he won't do anything with you. Um, you've got other collectibles you can grab. So like you can get like voice recordings of all of the main inmates. And basically you get to hear more of their backstories and like basically all of their descents into madness, which is pretty great. Um, and then the main story will always be like marked on your map. So while you're going around doing these other things, you can go back to a certain point to keep the main story going. Um, but oh my god, it was such a great game. Like I said, the mechanics were wonderful. Um, I don't think I've ever gotten to a point where like I dropped a combo and felt like it was the game's fault. Like, no, this is just a crappy game and it missed like an input. Like, no, like I realized what I did each time I did it. Like the controls were that good to it. And again, the story was also incredible. Like, I don't know if you haven't gotten to play the game, I don't want to ruin any of it for you. Um, but like
Yeah.
again, like I said, it revolves on Batman having to leave and get out of the asylum, as opposed to like being out in Gotham and getting them in. And then what you're finding out is as you go through the game, you start getting these like super powered villains. They're basically being drugged up with something called Titan, which is like a kind of like a super version of Bane's like performance serum that he uses to get really big,
Mhm.
which is Venom. But so you've got that subplot going on with what's going on of you basically battling or boiling down to this last fight with the Joker. And oh, just such a great game. Could not give enough praise. I remember like honestly, I was mad that it didn't get Game of the Year, and it went up against one of my favorite video games of all time that year for Game of the Year and lost to it. And I was still mad that it lost to that game, which was Uncharted 2.
Yeah.
Which is yeah, like that's another thing. Like I was mad that Uncharted 2 beat Arkham Asylum, and I love Uncharted 2. But I just thought it was that amazing of a game.
Mhm.
And of course, like the series continues on. The next one in the series is Arkham City, where they kind of do the same thing, where they give you a sandbox to a degree,
Yeah.
where um, basically you get Hugo Strange as this new bad guy, and he's like who you think is pulling strings through most of the game, and he's pitched to the mayor of Gotham that the crime has gotten so bad that you cannot hold them to like a police station or or the asylum anymore. So let's literally like border off or block off a large portion of the city and just keep all the villains in there, so that if someone's crime is bad enough, you literally get dropped off inside the city, and then like, yep, you're off to fend for yourself after that. And so what you kind of get is like the larger villains in the Batman universe are just basically running the prison from the inside. And so it's kind of that same thing. Like you've got to get out of the city, but really you could leave the city at any time because you're Batman. But
Yeah.
your goal is to basically get the city shut down, because it's, as you find out, pretty much like against like, some amendments here, like cruel, like Arkham City is cruel and unusual punishment. Like
Yeah.
that shouldn't be a thing. But yeah, kind of the same thing. You've got like things that happen from the first game are kind of like rippling into this game. So you've still got the Titan drug going around. So you have to fight Titan villains here and there. But just another like really well developed game. The story was brilliant. You get this added character in the game, so now you don't have to play as Batman the whole time. So you get Catwoman in this game, and they do such a great job of like making the combat for both characters distinctively different from each other.
Yes, they do. They absolutely do. And kind of to your point too about how there are some games where there's just bad mechanics. I'm not going to call anybody out specifically on this, but in this game, it is a cool like free flowing behavioral combat system where you like there's different modes. So based on what mode you're on, you kind of see the exclamation point over the enemies. If you increase in difficulty, you don't see it anymore. So to your point, yes, it's much more about relationship between player and game at that point, which I thought was really a strong point of the Arkham series. And even though I didn't spend as much time with it as you did, Joe, I appreciated it for voice actors, as we've mentioned before. Oh, and that reminds me, Arlene Sorkin actually voiced Harley Quinn.
Okay.
For this, for at least the big three Arkham ones. I think Tara Strong did voice her in Origins.
Yeah, and that was another game, like that was kind of like a game beside itself, because Kevin Conroy wasn't Batman on that game either, and you didn't get Mark Hamill back for Joker for his limited time in that game.
But Joe, you know who we did get for that game?
Steve Bloom?
No, we did not.
Nolan North?
Nope. Oh. We got Roger Craig Smith, Ezio Auditore himself. So he's Ezio and Batman.
And it can't be too mad then if it's Roger Craig Smith.
No, not at all, dude. And then Troy Baker did the Joker for that. So so I mean he did a great job in The Last of Us as Joel. So it's like, I mean, you still had good voice acting.
Oh yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely, when it came to Arkham Origins, it definitely was not necessarily the story or the voice acting or even the gameplay. I guess it wasn't the voice acting or the gameplay that made it bad. It was more or less the story was just kind of meh.
Yeah. And I read that too. I didn't play Origins, but I heard the same thing. I mean, it's and this kind of mirrors the whole rest of this Superman video game universe that we've been going through today, right? Like it's not just a couple people, the quote unquote the folks in their parents' basements that are I'm in my own basement, damn it.
You paid for that basement, no one else.
Well, but it's kind of refreshing in a sense though to see that there's like usually when it's criticism, I want to explore this and fully understand it, but it's not something that I disagreed with. When I look through these properties, it's like, okay, yep, like I played this game, I totally get what they're saying. And it's not like how like when a movie comes out nowadays, you have like the fan response and the critic response. These games, like people pretty much aligned on those opinions. So yeah, I definitely think that that had to be the case here, because I haven't seen anything that would tell me otherwise.
No, that's exactly what it was. I mean, you had a few new characters introduced, like Deathstroke came in that game, and I remember like that game though, like with the Deathstroke fight, like if you did play on like New Game Plus, where like you said, like the notifications that like, hey, I'm about to attack and go away, that fight was like nearly impossible. Like that was a very, very frustrating fight, because
he hits like
Deathstroke.
1,000 times in a row, doesn't he? Like he
Oh
just
yeah.
continue. Yeah, he just slices and dices, and it's such a
Hmm.
fast fight.
It is. So like even if you get a first counter right, like he'll do like basically three moves right after that first counter. And if you don't counter those blows at the exact right time, like he just knocks you out. And
Yeah.
it was frustrating as hell. Hmm.
But once again, this is the difference between, the early 90s Batman that just was like, hey, fuck you, gamer. This
Hmm.
was like, you're going to get better at this game as
Oh
you play
yeah.
it. This is an
Hmm.
actual challenge. It's not just hard to be hard. Like, you're going to get through this. It's going to take you a little while, but,
Hmm.
I still enjoyed the difficulty, ramp up there.
Oh yeah. Again, it was still again like I'd say it was a fun game. Wasn't a great game, but it was still fun. Um, it definitely was
Yeah.
not on par with the rest of the Arkham series.
But once again, I think the important thing here is
Hmm.
to recognize that these games were obviously brilliantly acted, but the writing for
Hmm.
we'll call it the spiritual three Arkham games, were they're great. It was a great exploration between Batman and Joker,
Hmm.
which is obviously one of the best aspects of the Batman universe, and so they explored that to perfection. I mean, honestly, it was kind of an emotional experience to a point.
Hmm.
Um, so we're not going to ruin it.
No.
I would definitely want to leave that for folks.
Hmm.
Um, but what it did for me though, playing that game, was what does Batman do next?
Hmm.
Like what can we do with the Batman property next year? And fortunately, that question would get answered pretty quick by Telltale Games in 2016.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and great, just a fantastic company to do something different with the Batman property. So I think have we talked to Telltale before on this podcast?
I think we've
I
mentioned
think it's popped up once or twice.
Yeah, I think we've
Hmm.
mentioned them at least once. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Telltale Games, actually, you know what, Joe? I think I said this exact same thing before. Telltale became became a company because there was that action adventure point and click genre.
Hmm.
That we now that I'm saying this, it's like you could probably rewind one of our episodes and hear me say this exact same thing. Um, but yeah, long story short, there's a lot of these developers that made these point and click action games in the old days. And when I say old days, folks, I mean like late 80s here, into early 90s.
Hmm.
Um, the companies kind of went bankrupt or defunct, and they stopped making them. And so these developers over time founded their own company, uh, and that would become Telltale. So these are basically, I would call them interactive movies.
Yeah. So think of it like back when you had like the old choose your own ending books from when we were
Yeah.
growing up. If you that were like you read something, they'd leave you with a choice, and depending on your choice, you'd turn to this page or continue reading immediately afterwards.
Yep.
And that's basically what these games did is they leave you with a choice, and that choice impacts the direction of the story.
Except the difference in a Telltale game is that just because you have a choice to make, it does not mean you actually want to make any of them.
No, you definitely don't.
Yeah, because I mean, it's sometimes a decision that you make, like if you have certain modes on the game turned on, you'll get a notification that says this character noticed that you said that, right?
Hmm.
Doesn't necessarily mean the whole game is going to change because of that, but
No.
they'll probably reference it later on, right?
Hmm.
So that's the framework upon which Batman is put into a Telltale game. And I thought that this was so refreshing, not just because of the format, but because they did stuff different with Batman
Hmm.
for once.
Yeah.
Um, and so you've got the point and click and the tough decisions, but once again, this game came out about 5 years ago. The most recent one, the sequel to it, came out 4 years ago. So we're gonna actually we're not gonna do spoilers on these ones,
Mm-mm.
because we've done that a lot with some of these other properties. So I actually want people to play this one. I really do. Um,
Hmm.
but there are certain critical things about the mob families of Gotham, particularly the Wayne family, that gets changed in this Batman interpretation. Batman himself still stays, relatively,
Hmm.
relatively similar,
Yeah.
but these things that happen with his family and some of his friends, like you find out he actually has a really close relationship with the Penguin, and like they grew up together instead of
Mm-hmm.
just being a random villain. Like they kind of update him to be more of like a modern day fencer, or like low tier mobster kind of guy.
Yeah.
And so their relationship gets explored, which I thought that was fun because it's a little bit different. So hats off to Telltale on that. They
Mm-hmm.
took this award winning format they built with like The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones and a couple others, and they applied it to Batman, and it just works so damn well.
It really does. And like any Telltale game, do yourself a favor and play through it no fewer than twice, two times.
Yes.
Um, and basically play through one way, like you thinking making the choices that probably should be right and drive the story in a more positive manner, and then do the opposite the next playthrough just to see what happens.
Yeah. Well,
Hmm.
and the reason why it's so fun to do this is because you actually, by doing this, you get completely different interpretations of certain characters.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of fun things here with like Catwoman and Two-Face, and even your relationship with Alfred to an extent. So I thought that was when you start looking at the body of work here, okay, like we've got literally almost 35 years of Batman games. and and this is kind of where things stand, is with the
Hmm.
Arkham series and now with Telltale. I mean, we've got some of the strongest narrative based like Batman experiences we've ever received, and they have nothing to do with film.
No, and what's also great is that again, like these aren't just great Batman games, they're great games in
Yes.
general. So even if you, for some reason, were to replace Batman with something else, it could probably still work pretty well. They're
Yeah.
just really well made games.
Yeah. Well, and but look at the just the state of modern gaming, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Arkham Asylum came out at a time when like we've got Ubisoft just catching fire with all their third person experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it managed to not just be a good game in a crowd of good games, it managed to be an innovative game in a crowd
Yeah.
of good games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because its combat system, like you've mentioned, there's a lot of nuances to it. It stands out if you've played multiple different properties that have these types of I don't know if you want to call them like a parry, defense, attack kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this one was still really strong. And from a Telltale game standpoint, the Batman game is still really strong, even in their book of titles that they have.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played every single Telltale release for the last like 8 years, 10 years. I seriously, I played every single one of them. And the Batman experience was, I would say it was the most fleshed out one, because it's not just like you said, making one or two choices. Like you're actually throwing batarangs, you're actually like doing timed events that are
Mm-hmm.
somewhat complicated for a Telltale experience. Um, so yeah, dude, it's just a great, it's a great way to, I wouldn't say end the Batman like video game journey,
Mm-hmm.
because it's
Oh
going
yeah,
to
it's
keep
still gonna be
going.
going.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but the tide absolutely turned. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you came into like the Batman experience in 2005, you were probably far better off than Joe and I were.
Yeah, you had a really great starting point if you started in 2005.
Because I mean, it's unfortunate, right? Like I literally like trudged through, I mean, the majority of the shittiest times of Batman in video games. So with what we've gotten in the last 10 years, it's really encouraging, because the next entry in the Batman series won't come out until 2022.
Hmm.
And so that's also piggybacking off of the Arkham series, isn't it?
Kind of. So it's piggybacking off in the sense that you leave off with a major event that happened in the Arkham series, and they're saying the same thing happened in the storyline. However, they're also saying they're not continuing the events of the Arkham series. So where the Arkham series ends is with a major character development for Batman, and they're basically saying that same thing happened to him, but not for the same reasons. So therefore, it's not the same story going forward.
Okay. I guess I can understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Which it might make sense because of, once again, how just how emotional the Arkham series kind of wrapped, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe
Yeah.
it's a good idea. God, it's a total blank right now. But what is the next one coming out called?
Arkham Knights, which is also more confusing because by including is it Arkham Knights or is it Gotham Knights? I think it's Arkham Knights.
I think maybe. It's either Arkham Knights or Gotham Knights. Yeah, it's hard to know. I think it is Gotham Knights though. Now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And
yeah, it'd have to be because I mean Arkham Knight was the last in the Arkham series.
Yeah, we don't want to confuse our players here, right?
No.
So I think it is funny that we would end on Gotham Knights not even involving Batman, because that was really kind of the basis of what we did today was let's assess the games that really just focus on Batman, because there's plenty of other ones out there that like the Injustice series, which was a great fighting series. That was like the DC universe as a whole. So fortunately, if you've maintained being with us throughout this journey thus far, Batman is a video game experience across the 35 years where unfortunately there's a lot of bad things you had to experience.
a lot of bad in that 35 years.
Yeah. But hey, fortunately somebody was listening at Warner Brothers. Someone at DC clearly is paying attention now. And so for me, honestly, like I think a lot of trust was kind of earned back over the last 15 years, and really excited to see where they continue to go with this.
Thanks everyone for joining this week's conversation about Batman and the tumultuous journey he's endured in several video game entries. If you enjoyed this topic, why not mention the show to people who may enjoy it as well? And while you're spreading the word, why not like, comment, subscribe, and the all-important leaving of a review, because this will help our show a tremendous amount.
And join us in a few days, as we're going to be right back here for a discussion on the Caped Crusader and how his batsuit has changed quite a bit since its 1943 on-screen debut. Batman Week officially rolls on, and you won't want to miss this one. And until next time, keep on dissecting.